It's often easy to be overwhelmed with the sheer weight of responsibility we face in our world today. The noise of the world today makes it hard to zone in on God's plans and words for our lives. There's always something trending. There's always some new thing to be reviewed. In the age of social media, noise is much more than sound. It includes words and pictures as well. It means very often that we are disconnected from God or for extended periods of time. And this can be especially dangerous for a Christian because it leaves us vulnerable to the devil and his attacks. In this video, we'll discuss how to hear God's voice and hear Him when He calls to our spirits. But before we go further, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more great Christian content. Now back to the video. Whenever we're talking about hearing God's voice, we have to make it clear who God wants to talk to. God wants to talk to His children. God is a loving Father, and like a loving Father, He has an interest in a relationship with us. He wants to talk to us and be talked to. He wants to guide and protect us using His voice and words towards a future that is for our good. And that is God's plan for us. In 1 John chapter 10 verses 27, Jesus said, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me." John chapter 10 verses 27. God speaks to His flock. Now just as God did to Elijah in the calm wind or to Samuel in the dead of the night, God speaks to His people today. We just need to be more adept to hearing His voice. God keeps speaking, but we need the ability to recognize His voice. Like Samuel did in the night, like Elijah did in the storm, it is very important to know this. So the first step in hearing God's voice is knowing that He is speaking. Now the next step to hearing God's voice is understanding how God speaks. God speaks to us in a multitude of ways, and each way is possibly unique to the person that He's speaking to. To Moses, He came in the form of a burning bush, and to Elijah, as a quiet voice in the storm. He came to Paul on his journey to Damascus, and to Samuel as a voice in the night. Now God might be trying to speak to you in your own unique way. In fact, He might be using the church pastor to speak out to you. The messages you heard were not random. God used those messages to speak to you. The advice from the elders was not a coincidence. God gave them the wisdom and the voice to speak to you. God might then be reaching out to you through a quiet voice in the wind. In fact, through the noise of social media, the strife of conflict, and the difficulty of interpersonal relationships, God keeps reaching out, trying to make you hear His voice. Quiet, yet assertive and piercing. God's voice shines through the noise of whatever life throws at us. So to hear God, we have to be able to recognize His voice. Now God's voice is always in line with His character. He calls us to be patient and to be kind, to be loving and to be caring, to not be jealous or promoters of strife. And God's voice keeps us on the straight and narrow. Now God's voice has to be in contrast with the other voices that we would hear in our head, namely the voice of the devil and our own voice. Now the devil's voice is selfish, it's self-centered, and it cares only for the things of the flesh. The devil's voice is accusatory and it's self-serving. It makes depreciating comments, and it makes sure to remind us of all our failures. Our own voice reinforces our own prejudices. It's usually logical, and it tries to produce interferences based on logic and facts. Now when God talks to you, He goes beyond that. He isn't selfish, He isn't self-serving, and He's always true to His character. Now God's voice is true to how He has behaved in the Bible and how He will continue to behave. And that's why we need to study the Bible, so that we recognize who God is and we can hear His voice when He speaks. After we learn to recognize and distinguish God's voice, we have to be able to create the right environment to allow us to listen to God as He speaks. The first step, be still. And that's the first part of hearing God speak to your spirit. Be still. Now Moses heard God when he was in the field, Elijah in the calm, and Moses in the night. There's a reason why the times they heard God's voice, they were in the relatively calm periods of their lives. While there's noise around us, we have to learn to spend quiet times with God in prayer and reflection. And those are the moments that God uses to speak to us. Welcome God's voice and spirit into your life by actively asking Him to speak, and we are listening, and we welcome His voice into our lives. Like Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and he lay down in his place, according to 1 Samuel chapter 3 verses 9. Like Eli told Samuel, we have to respond positively to God's voice. We have to find a quiet area free from distraction. It's advisable to have this area be the same place every single day at a similar time every day. When we have established a quiet place and a routine, we need to keep our eyes firmly on God. And as you do that, ask God what He wants to say to you today. Listen, a huge part of prayer is listening. Yet we often speed through prayer, getting through the words that we want to say without paying too much heed to what God wants to say. If you truly want to hear God's voice, you have to give Him some time to respond after you pray. And while you pray, learn to write things down. Now this might seem insignificant, but God speaks to us at spontaneous moments. Now while you can do your best to be prepared for what God speaks to you while in the mood of prayer, you have to be ready and aware that He can speak to you at any moment. So learn to document even the littlest nugget from God. Don't spend too much time worrying about spelling or grammar. Don't spend time worrying how to figure things out. Write the words as they come, whenever they come, so that you can revisit and figure out what they mean later. So that's our video for today, guys. And we hope you learned a lot from today. And we hope you've been trying to hear from God. And we hope that this video also helps. And please let us know in the comments what your normal routine is when you're praying and you're trying to hear from God. We would love to read your comments. In fact, we love to read your comments and hear your thoughts also. So be sure to like the video and share. Until next time, have a blessed day.